Something out of the norm emerged from the Illinois state government this year. A lot of legislation adopted, no threats of working without a budget or a special session. However, lawmakers did go into overtime for a few days. Well, here are some of the key things that passed and failed in Springfield. Lawmakers adopted a $40 billion state budget, the largest in Illinois history, a $45 billion capital spending package for infrastructure. Illinois became the first legislature to legalize recreational marijuana. Betting on sports will be legalized. Now it's still waiting for Governor J.B. Pritzker to sign that legislation. Some things, though, that didn't get adopted: a new gun registration law that would require fingerprinting and a higher fee for gun licensing. A proposal to allow rent control also failed. And the state pension crisis really hasn't been solved either. There's also the constitutional amendment that would change the state income tax structure from a flat rate to a graduated rate based on income. Voters will decide that next year. And Democrats, though, in the meantime, are riding high on all of this. One of them joins us for a conversation this morning, Illinois State Representative Mike Halpin. Welcome back to the program, Representative.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
We did invite Representatives Tony McCombie, Dan Swanson, and Senator Neil Anderson. All had prior commitments and couldn't make it to join us as well this morning. Iowa and Illinois seem like mirror opposites. Iowa's Republican majority the last 2 years pushed a strong conservative agenda. This year, Democrats in Illinois adopted some very progressive ideas. Are the Democrats being too aggressive?
I don't think so at all. When you look at some of the big things that we did pass, there was a lot of bipartisan support. When you talk about sports wagering, recreational marijuana, the budget itself, the capital plan, all drew some significant support from the Republicans as well.
When you say significant, though, when there's such a strong supermajority among Democrats, it only takes a couple to really call it bipartisan, right?
To some extent, but when you look at the budget and the capital plan, you had, I think, 20 House Republican votes on that, which is half of their caucus. There were negotiations trying to really wrap it up that last couple days of session. And I think when you hear some of the Republican leadership talk about it, it was a good budget that is going to do the state of Illinois some good.
Democrats adopted that record $40 billion budget. The governor touts it as a balanced plan, though it makes some revenue assumptions to get there, which are not always reliable or accurate. What do you say to critics who call that reckless spending?
So for 3 years now, since I've been in Springfield, we've been able to pass budgets, and all three of them with Republican support. I think it fairly balances the need for important government services with trying to control the wasteful spending that we've seen in years past. And if you look at the line items in this particular budget, I think we strike that balance pretty well. It's certainly slightly larger than last year's budget, but that's the nature of inflation and the cost of services. And I think the stability that passing a budget provides in itself is helpful to the state of Illinois.
A key component of the Democratic agenda is that state income tax. The graduated income tax rate will be decided by voters next year in a constitutional amendment. This needs to be approved by 60% of voters, and that is a very tall order. What kind of contingency plan do Democrats have if that fails, which really is a real possibility?
Well, you know, if the referendum were to fail, we'd have to go back to trying to do what we did this year, negotiate a budget that's balanced and meets the needs and provides the services that the citizens want. But I think we do have the next 18 months to focus on the benefits of the graduated income tax structure and really emphasize why it's important for Illinois to go that direction. You know, we need to join a majority of the other states as well as the federal government in making sure that in our case, the Chicago millionaires and billionaires pay their fair share. When you look at the actual tax burden, the actual state and local tax burden on our citizens, the poorest among us pay close to 15% of their income in state and local taxes, whereas the top 1% of income earners pay about half that, 7.5%. It's upside down, and we need to fix it. This is one way to do it.
Think it's going to be a tough sell, though, for Democrats to make next year when it comes to the ballot measure?
I really don't, as I've already been out knocking on doors and talking to constituents and really educating them as to what, first of all, who the tax actually affects and what the benefits of the revenue from that tax are going to go to. When they see that the idea is to increase funding for schools and higher education and assistance to our local governments, which will then in turn lower their property taxes, it's a very receptive message.
Well, and the Democrats argue in favor of that income tax change as a cut to most taxpayers, but we will see tax increases on gas, alcohol, cigarettes, new taxes on streaming services and ride-sharing services like Uber. I guess how can your party make the argument that things will be cheaper for the average person in Illinois?
Well, I'd first have to mention that there is no streaming tax in the budget or the capital plan. There's no ride-sharing tax. At the beginning of this year, there are many ideas put forward. The idea is, you know, all hands on deck, let's see what is out there, what our options are. But at the end of the day, the
Those two things
streaming
fell
tax
through.
were not there. Rideshare tax wasn't there. There was an increase to the cigarette tax, and obviously for capital expenses.
But the argument that things are going to be cheaper when you see the gas tax double, for example.
Sure. So some things certainly will be cheaper, and the idea is to put resources into our local governments so that they can lower property taxes. For 30 years, we've continually starved our school districts, starved our cities and villages, and their only response, the only way they can raise money is through the property tax. And we now see the effect of one of the highest property taxes in the nation. This is a way to reverse that trend, put needed resources back into our local governments so that they can in turn lessen that pressure on our property owners.
We have more ground to cover with Representative Mike Halpin. Illinois state lawmakers have that plan for property tax relief. We'll get to that in a moment, how that would work and what could stand in the way. For the record.